Matter of seconds. There we go. And we're being recorded as well. Can you log us on then? Good to go. Right, good morning, everyone. Morning. Oh, that's good, isn't it? People in the room. That's amazing, isn't it? Not talking to a computer screen. Thanks very much, everyone, for coming along today. Very, very excited to have so many people in the room. As I said just a minute ago, we are being joined by some people on Zoom. So the first piece of housekeeping is when we've got the event going on, people are speaking, asking questions. Can we just keep background noise as close to zero as possible? We've got one microphone in the middle of the room, which is hopefully going to pick up all the noise for everything that's going on today. For obvious reasons, we didn't want to be handing around microphones and worrying about the sanitising and hygiene and things. So please bear that in mind. Those of you that join us face to face, there will be a chance afterwards for a natter and a bit of lunch and stuff. So please bear with us till we get to that 12:30 point. Right, so welcome. My name is Matt Cliff. For those who don't know, I'm the engagement manager for Thomas Poplar Trust, and part of my job is to support sight loss councils in the region. Today's event is a Merseyside Sight Loss Council event, so I'm not going to talk too much about that because I'm going to let Naomi set the scene for that in a second. A few other bits of housekeeping. Again, it's very strange to do housekeeping. You don't have to do much housekeeping in your own house, do you, when you're talking to a phone or a computer? So in the case of an emergency evacuation, we've got sighted guides and volunteers that will show everyone where the nearest exit is, and we'll go to the meeting point outside. So please, stay calm, be careful, don't worry. Those of you joining us from Zoom, sorry, I keep talking to the laptop. Those of you joining us from Zoom, obviously, if we do have to emergency evacuate, please don't panic. My colleague Ian will be there to keep you nice and calm, and I'm sure you will all be fine. In terms of sanitising, we have got hand sanitizer on every table. There are also antibacterial wipes if you want to clean down the tables or charge any services or equipment so you feel comfortable. Please respect everyone's decision whether or not to wear a face mask, and also consider social distancing and things like that. It's a non-smoking site, so if anyone does want to go and smoke, please go off-site. And I think that is us for housekeeping. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Naomi, one of our Sight Loss Council members, who's going to tell you a bit more about today's event. So thanks for coming, everyone.
Hello everyone, and thank you for coming to today's event, which is being called Life After Lockdown. My name is Naomi Ditchfield, and I'm a member of Merseyside Sight Loss Council. I think we all know how difficult it has been for us in the last 18 months during lockdown and the pandemic. And we just like to get people's ideas of how they've managed to cope during this time. Being all visually impaired, we know the difficult challenge and additional hurdles we've had to overcome during lockdown. And I'm sure one of the things that we found was trying to get our shopping online. So we were able to collaborate with other sight loss charities and get priority slots from various supermarkets so we could get our groceries and other goods. Another hurdle that we found during lockdown was social distancing. As I'm sure you're all aware, it's not just us that have problems with this, but our guide dogs and people wanting to come up and help us or not help us, as the case may be. And I'm sure most of us have found it very stressful and making us wary of other people. I know I have, and found it very challenging. So we just want to get your ideas on how you've managed to cope today at this event. The other issues are we have got 3 speakers with us today, so they will be giving us various conversations about lockdown and what they do for sight loss charities. I'd like to say thank you for coming today, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Frank McFarlane and I am a member of the Merseyside Sightline Council. And it's my job to steer us through the morning up to 12:30. After that, it's lunch and I take no responsibility. But I am under pain of death that we stick to time. In fact, it's worse than pain of death because Matt may well take steps to ban me from playing for our cricket team. So we do have to keep to time. It's my job, first of all, to introduce our three speakers. And our first speaker, each of them is going to speak for 10 minutes. And I'm going to repeat 10 minutes. If necessary, I'll give you a 1-minute warning. But please don't think I'm being rude. But as I say, I'm under orders. Our first speaker is Michael Crilly. Michael is Director of Social Inclusion and Participation at Mersey Care NHS Trust. And Michael, it's all yours.
Frank, thank you very much. Good morning. I nearly said good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, but good morning. Hello, especially to people who are on Zoom. But I must say it's so lovely to be here in a room with real live people. It's particularly exciting. I feel as though interactions only happened on a screen for such a long time. So it's fabulous to be back amongst people and to be here with you today. As Frank said, I work for an organisation that some of you may know. It's Mersey NHS Trust, which is predominantly known, I guess, as being the mental health trust in our part of the world. But also for the last few years, it's been the provider of community-based physical health services. So things like district nursing, therapies, walk-in centres, podiatry, those kinds of things. So we're a trust, I guess, that is by and large not like your typical NHS trust where everybody looks at one big shiny hospital like Alder Hay down the way. We're a trust built to be in the community, and whilst we do have some hospital beds, the vast majority of our work goes on with people down our street, round your way. We're a community-based organisation. And the service that I'm here to talk to you about today is in my department. And I've got this title, Social Inclusion and Participation. Nobody has a clue what it means. So I make it up as I go along, and it seems to work reasonably well. But the service I'm here to chat to you about today is something called the Life Rooms. And I don't know whether many people have heard about the Life Rooms at all. I know there's one or two. That's encouraging. We're a service that was set up now 5 years ago, May just gone. And it's an entirely non-clinical service, which is a bit unusual in the NHS. We're not doctors, we're not nurses, we're not therapists. We're a community-based service that seeks to provide non-clinical support. And the reason we do that is actually a vast amount of research and evidence shows that if we were to give people a much better start in life, wrap around the right kind of support around housing, managing of money, access to education, and tackling social isolation, if we were to really address all of those effectively in the community where people live, well, guess what? There's less chance that they're going to end up sick and in a hospital. That's probably no shock to anybody who's lived in our communities all their lives. We know the good community, good support, relationships are healthy. They keep you feeling well, and they're particularly protective factor around your mental health and well-being. But one of the things we've discovered in Mersey Care is that for many of the people who fall into crisis around their mental health, they come to Mersey Care services, they get really good clinical support, we hope, not always, but we hope that by and large they do. But actually the things that really stop them moving to a life beyond a mental health diagnosis are often the practical things like the housing, the debt, and access to jobs. The world can be a pretty unfair place. And if you are in any way perceived to be different from the norm, then actually you're already behind a huge swathe of the population in tackling some of those social issues. So what we decided to do 5 years ago was take over a library. Now, there's not many NHS services take over a library, but we took over the beautiful Walton Library just on the corner of Rice Lane and Everett Avenue, just up from the old Walton General, for you, those of you who know that neck of the woods. And it was a Carnegie Library that was given to the City of Liverpool in 1917. And the library was under threat of closure and would have gone had we not stepped in. But why did we step in? Well, I guess the reason we did is the people who accessed our crisis services were telling us that they were petrified at the threat of closure to the city's libraries. 9 of the city's 19 libraries were slated to close. And for so many of our people, the library wasn't just about books. It was a real lifeline. It was a place they could go and see another living soul. It was a place where somebody might smile at them, welcome them. It was a place where they could access free IT if they had to do a daily job search or face benefit sanction. It was a really important hub of community and a place where people found humanity. And that was exactly what our service users were telling us they needed. They didn't just need clinical care, they needed help with life. So we took over that library and we opened the very first Life Rooms Walton. And that took off so much. People were walking through our doors in their droves, not simply people with a diagnosed mental health condition, but more importantly, people who didn't have a mental health condition at all. The people who wanted to get into the driving seat of their own health and well-being and stop their mental and latterly physical health deteriorating. So it was incredibly successful. A year after we opened, we were suddenly approached to open one in the town centre in Southport. A year after that, we were approached by UBird Further Education College in the heart of Bootle Docks to open one there because they in particular were grappling with mental health issues for their student population. And then a year after that, we opened 2 further satellites. We were 2 days a week in South Liverpool Treatment Centre in Garston and 2 days a week in the Playhouse Theatre in the city centre. I love that, the notion that I don't feel great about my mental health today. It's not that I'm going to go to the GP or a clinic. I'm going to go to the theatre for my help and support. So we rapidly grew what we were doing. And by the time we went into the pandemic, there were 5,000 people a month walking through our doors to seek support. And that shows you that what we have is something that people want and need. But what is it we actually do? Well, I guess there's 3 elements and aspects to the things that we offer through our Life Room service. The first one is we offer a learning offer, learning for well-being. So we have in excess of 100 courses and learning opportunities or experiences that people can access for free, no matter where they come from. The courses that we would fill all day, every day, if we could, would be anxiety, self-esteem, and confidence. There is no end to the demand in our society for help with those issues in life. We run a whole host of courses that we co-produce. In fact, all of our courses are co-produced, I should say, by people with lived experience of a health condition and people with expertise, whatever that may mean. So we have a range of focused mental health and physical health courses where we bring clinical colleagues together with people with lived experience of the condition, and they create that learning experience. So understanding and managing anxiety and depression, or living with COPD or diabetes, a whole range of these courses. Also a huge creative offer. So all the time we're trying to help people move to a life beyond their diagnosis. You know, you may live with a health condition, but it shouldn't be the only thing that defines you. You have a right to a life that is rich, purposeful, and of your own choosing. So we work with a huge range of cultural partners to develop opportunities around walking, gardening, singing. We work with the Liverpool Philharmonic for years now, doing something called the Super Sing. So 30 people come together, work with a Philharmonic conductor. At the end of that, there's a performance in the Philharmonic's music hall. And then we don't want to create a Mersey Care community choir where people are defined by Mersey Care and their health. We encourage them to form a choir out of that social grouping or join choirs that are out there. We developed a course with a Liverpool chef called Fed Up, 30 affordable recipes, all for under a £5 using a slow cooker. And we got Tesco's to donate slow cookers and larder packs to the graduates because that was the barrier to taking learning into your life. Now we have a chef lecturer on the staff, and we have courses like healthy takeaways, food and mood, a whole range, you name it, we'll have a crack at it. And I know there's colleagues who are here today who we're talking about how we can work more closely around learning experiences for people with visual impairments. And I think we would recognise we would want to make our learning offer far more accessible to people who may be taking part in today's meeting. But it is good to know that there's one or two people who do come and see us regularly already. The second bit that we do is these days, 1 minute left, social prescribing, it's called, trying to connect people to community assets around the city. We don't want you to be dependent on any one organisation. We want you to get back into life and mix with people from all parts of our society. So we have 120 plus voluntary sector partners who work with us on support around all sorts of practical issues, but connecting people with the community assets in their part of the world. And the final bit is community in its sense. We're trying to park our little hubs around the Merseyside area in such a way as to be not something that dominates your community, but is a little cog in a system that begins to help other cogs work in your local community to help them to become happier and healthier. That's the sales pitch. All I need to say is liferooms.org is our website. Everything we do is for free. The council has just invested, it was just announced on Friday, quite a sizable investment of 1.8 million in expanding the Life Rooms offer across the city. So we anticipate being far more visible across the city in libraries and one-stop shops and children's centres, and that will be rolling out in the coming year. I will shut up because I have gone way over my limit, but thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Michael. You've done me a great favour. Well done. That's excellent. Thank you. Our second speaker, who's also going to be restricted to 10 minutes, is Ian Edwards. Ian is service manager of Sightline. Ian, I hope I've got your title right.
Correct, Frank.
It's all yours, sir.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I will definitely be under 10 minutes, Frank. You don't need to worry because I don't have as much to say as Michael. Sorry. So I'm Ian Edwards. I'm the services manager at Sightline Vision, and I'll explain a little bit more about what Sightline Vision is in a moment. I also have my colleague sat over at the back, Becky, who is the communications coordinator at Sightline, and we'd both be very happy to talk to anybody after this event finishes. So what does Sightline Vision do? It's quite simple. We don't do anywhere near as many different things as Michael. We provide a confidential telephone befriending service. So that's a service been operating now since 2018. And it's a service that is exclusively for blind and partially sighted people. So we don't accept anybody onto our service who doesn't have a visual impairment. That's one of our prerequisites. Our service is exclusively delivered by a team of trained volunteers, all of whom have experience of sight loss themselves. That may be that they have a sight condition themselves, or they have a close family member, or they've worked in the sight loss sector. So there's a real empathy between our volunteers and our service users. Like Michael, we are fully funded, but not by the council, but by the National Lottery. And that funding takes us well into 2024. So we're here to stay for a little while yet. And the organisation has actually been going since 2002, set up by a lady from the Liverpool area called Eileen Green, who some of you may know. So Matt did ask me to say what's the impact of the last 18 months. I'm sure we'll all recognise it's been a very difficult 18 months, but in terms of Sightline, been relatively little impact on what we do. Because, as I said, everything we do is over the telephone. It always has been, and it always will be. However, the pandemic caused the shutdown of huge amounts of services for blind and partially sighted people. And we saw the impact of that as people were referred into our service. We saw over 100% increase in 2020, and we've continued to see a big increase in 2021. Indeed, we took on 20 new service users from one organisation last month as they shut down their telephone support services that they put in place for the pandemic and started to move back to face-to-face activities, but recognised that some of their service users still needed a telephone support service, which is what we provide. The other impact of COVID has been our difficulty in recruiting volunteers. Our volunteers are hugely valued within the organisation. Without them, we couldn't deliver our service. They are the people that make it happen. We are completely dependent upon them. And we found that getting volunteers throughout the pandemic has been a particularly difficult thing. Many people sort of had time, but went across and helped the NHS with test and trace and other sorts of things. So there's a real sort of void in that area. But we got through it. We're still going. We're still supporting a lot of people with a team of about 40 trained volunteers at the moment. And what about the future? I was talking to somebody earlier, and I still think that the impact of the pandemic and how it's going to work out, we're still not seeing the end of it by any means. So we feel there's a real need for our service going forward, and we think that as people begin to sort of come out of isolation, which has been a real problem for the sector as a whole, that we'll continue to see a lot of people referred into our service. So if you know anybody that it would benefit from it, then do talk to me or Becky later. And if you'd like to find out more about what we do as well, we literally last week launched a brand new website, sightline.org.uk. And that's got lots of information. It's got lots of stories from both our service users and our volunteers about how they've benefited from the service, many of whom see the service as an absolute lifeline for what's happened over the last 18 months and for the future as well. And if I give you just one example, so we had a service user come onto the service last year, an elderly gentleman in his 90s, and he is matched up with one of our trained volunteers. They talk for 3 hours a week, every week without fail. And it's one of his big highlights of his week. And without that support, his life wouldn't be as rich as it is at the moment. Final thing, we are on all the usual social media channels, so you can pick us up there as well. I've done my 10 minutes, Frank. Thank you.
The most disciplined speakers I've ever come across, believe me. Excellent, thank you, Ian. I think there you have examples of what Ian and Mike have been saying, and indeed what Naomi has been saying, and I'm sure with our next speaker too, of some of the problems that aren't always obvious, but certainly are there. Our third speaker, if my mum was here now, she'd shout at me and really tell me off, because I've left our lady speaker until third. Ladies first was her precept. However, I'm sure Kelly won't mind. Kelly is also a member of our Sight Loss Council, and Kelly is founder of Six Dots Counselling, and indeed one of my former students. So I'm very proud to introduce her this morning. Kelly, 10 minutes.
Thank you, I'll stick to time.
Thanks.
Hi everyone, thanks very much for having me here today. It's really, like everyone said, it's great to be back in the room with people because I am sick of Zoom. But yeah, so just to put this into a little bit of context really, so I'll just tell you a little bit about myself and then hopefully that it'll kind of make sense a bit more. So I am visually impaired myself, like obviously many of you here, and have been since I was born. Like Frank just said, he used to be my teacher, so I went to St. Vincent's. And then kind of after school, I went to university and I've done a few different things job-wise in terms of journalism and marketing and a few different things really. But I think as I got older, I wanted to do something different. And I went through a few life experiences myself. And about 7 years ago, I decided to train as a counsellor. Just something completely different to what I've done before. And I've worked a lot with kind of bereavement and I've worked with carers. So I've done a lot of counselling in the past few years. During the lockdown, I think as has been mentioned by Naomi and others in the room today, it was really, really tough for us, for visually impaired people, with social distancing, with losing independence, with worrying about going out and about. So life did really change. And it was during that time that I read a lot of stories in the media around, other people who were really struggling. And I felt that there was kind of, although there are other, larger organisations that do offer some counselling support, I felt that it would be a good time to utilise the skills that I have with counselling and to help other visually impaired people. So that at that point, I set up the organisation called Six Dots Counselling, and that is to provide a sight loss counselling service for anyone who's blind, partially sighted or visually impaired. So Leslie, one of my colleagues, is here with me today. She's the chairperson of the management committee. And I kind of got this idea during lockdown, but we applied for the first lot of funding and I wasn't really sure whether it would go anywhere. And we got national lottery funding and a lot of other funding since, which is great because it now means that we can offer a free counselling service to people who've got sight loss. So at the moment, I am kind of the only counsellor. In the next few months, we are looking to bring in another counsellor as well because the demand is quite high. So counselling is quite different to other things that have been talked about today. So befriending, which is absolutely brilliant, where people need someone to chat to. Counselling is quite different in terms of you've got sort of more therapeutic boundaries. So I'm trained in person-centred counselling, cognitive behaviour therapy. So in terms of counselling, it's more about working through an issue with someone or helping them to move forward in their own life. So it's more than just a chat, it's kind of working through something together. At the moment, we offer counselling over the telephone, on Zoom or face-to-face, depending on what people feel comfortable with. And I'm hoping that as we go forward, more people will want it face-to-face because I think it's a really good way of helping people to build their confidence. So I work at the moment with people of all ages and from all backgrounds. So from people in their 20s who are just, found out that they're losing their vision, right through to people who are in the older age group who've just really struggled during lockdown. The sight loss counselling service that I provide can be for people who, they may want counselling because of their sight loss. They may actually want it for a different reason. It might be because they've had a bereavement or something's going on at home or they're struggling with depression and anxiety. The fact is that the sight loss is a vehicle to enable them to, access the service for free. And I think that the fact that I have lived experience of having a visual impairment really helps. And any other counsellors that we take on will also have lived experience of visual impairment. Because I think what you find is no matter what issue people bring to counselling, whatever it is they want to talk about, you often find that the sight loss forms a part of it. So, I've worked with people who've been bereaved, and obviously the main reason they need the counselling is the bereavement. However, because they can't see, that person who they've lost might have been their eyes as well. So the sight thing often comes into it in so many different ways. And I hope that through the lived experience that I have, that I'm able to support them in that way. We are also in the Sefton area. We've just got funding to do some group sessions. So again, to kind of re-engage people in very small groups, sort of 6 to 8 people, where we're going to look at how lockdown's been for people and use some of the techniques of cognitive behavioural therapy to help them with their depression or anxiety, or just use the techniques. So things like visualizations and grounding exercises will really help them, to feel more relaxed if they're struggling with anxiety. Recently, I was working with a young girl who'd had counselling in the past, and she said to me, the counselling she'd had before was great, but she said to me what a difference it made to talk to someone with a visual impairment. And it's always good to hear that, because I think, I always think having lived experience helps, but it's nice to hear that back from other people, that it really does. So we have got our website is 6counselling.org, and we are on social media as well. If anyone wants any information, I will be here, and I can give contact numbers or take your contact details. If anyone wants anything in an alternative format, I can take your details and get it to you either in Braille or large print or whatever works for you. So I think that's everything, and obviously later on I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. Very much so. Those are our three speakers. Now, between now and 12 o'clock, we're going to have some questions. We've got some pre-submitted questions, and also there will be some from our colleagues on Zoom and some from the floor. I can assure you that if your question isn't dealt with, or you haven't had a chance to ask it, we will take questions and deal with them and signpost people and give you feedback. So you may go away today without your question having been dealt with, but it will be, rest assured, this isn't just a meeting and there'll be a void and nothing else happens. I think that's fair, Matt, is it? Absolutely. Thank you. Great. What I'm going to do, I'm going to ask Jules Lee, who's also a member of our Sightline Council, to go through one or two questions for our speakers, and then I'll try and take some from the floor as well. Again, sorry to repeat, but I would ask the speakers, please be succinct. Thank you. So, Jules, do you want to carry on?
Yeah, sure. So, 3 questions for each of you. So, first 3 questions, I should say, for Michael. First question is, what would you say is the biggest opportunity in your work in the coming year?
So, Michael, can I just check that you've heard that on Zoom, okay? I presume so. Carry on, Michael.
The biggest opportunity, I think it's the fact that the world is opening up a bit again. We likewise moved all of our services during the pandemic over the phone and online, but we are massively aware that that excludes a vast swathe of the population from accessing support, and often the most vulnerable. So for me, I think it's the fact that the doors are opening up a bit and people can move around. But what we are aware of is that the impact on people's mental health throughout the pandemic has been vast. And it's going to be a number of years, in a sense, before we properly understand that impact. But I think the faster we can start getting society opening up, moving and connecting, we can kind of get early help to people to stop it becoming a crisis.
Okay, Jules.
So the second question, you talked about in your session the need for you to focus more towards the service provision for blind and partially sighted people. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you will actually go about doing that?
So we've had a couple of conversations already with friends from Bradbury Fields. We'll be having another one today, actually, and fixing up an opportunity to explore further what we can do out of both sites. So actually, what can my guys come and do where you are already at and meet regularly? And similarly, what can potentially you do to come and help us develop our staff, develop our learning experiences, co-create opportunities for people?
Jules, within the next 10 minutes, can we deal with your questions and restrict it to that, and then move to the floor?
Say that again, Frank, sorry.
During the next 10 minutes, can we deal with your questions, and then I can move to taking any from the floor or from Zoom?
Sure.
So
yeah,
that's great, thank you.
Okay, so the final question, Michael, I think actually you probably touched on it in your last response. How can people get involved in terms of getting, how can people get involved in terms of supporting your work going forward?
I guess I have touched on it. We're hoping to come and spend more time at groups and sessions like this, where we can maybe begin to get more feedback about the things that are a challenge for you around any forms of life access. And then we want to help. We want you to help us create the learning experiences. It shouldn't be a do-to process. This is a do with a work side-by-side process.
Great, thank you. So questions to Ian. Again, same first question. What would you say is the biggest opportunity for your work in the coming year?
Undoubtedly, the biggest opportunity for us is to re-engage with our partner organisations and increase the service offering. So I'm already talking to the eye clinic liaison officers across the region. I'm talking with national and local sight loss charities to raise the awareness of what we do and make it more available than it is at the moment and increase the number of service users that we can support.
Okay. What trends have you identified on the back of the 100% increase that you talked about earlier, and what is happening as a result?
Okay, so the increase was a challenge for us as an organisation. What we've seen is that during the pandemic, blind and partially sighted people have become increasingly isolated. That's the major trend. But we're also seeing a break in the trend of the service being predominantly to people aged over 60, and we're taking on younger and younger service users, and interestingly, younger and younger volunteers as well.
And finally, you mentioned obviously the impact on COVID. There seems to be lots of information and news at the moment about a potential increase again. So have you got any message for blind and partially sighted people as we go forward into the winter months?
I agree that the trend for COVID hasn't dropped off at the rate that I'm sure those in authority would like to have seen. All I can say is that we will continue to be there for blind and partially sighted people, and we are making every effort that we can to make sure that we can meet any increase in demand that might happen over the winter months.
Thank you very much. Question for Kelly. Kelly, again, the same question initially. What is the biggest opportunity for your work over the coming year? You mentioned that you have some new funding. So could you just tell us what your opportunity would be?
I think because we're quite a new organisation, our opportunities really is around building up the relationships with a lot more organisations. So at the moment, we get a lot of referrals from Echoes, from Bradley Fields, Galloway. So it's just keeping those relationships and building up more so that we can reach out to as many people as possible in the Merseyside area.
Okay. You talked about your personal experiences in terms of what led you to setting up the charity. What do you think was the biggest learning point?
I think, it's realising that everyone's, I mean, I knew this anyway, but I think when you're working with people on, such an individual basis, it's realising how different everyone's journey is. So, someone could have experienced the same thing, but everyone's journey to that place is just so different.
Okay. What would you say for anyone that's listening in or is sitting in the room today who's got an idea but hasn't actually done anything about it yet?
Just go for it, do it. Don't hold back, because ideas often do grow into things. So just do it.
Thanks very much, speakers. Thanks, Jules. Can I just ask now, Rachel, I hope you can hear me.
Yeah.
Oh, good, excellent. Are there any questions which are burning from our Zoom colleagues?
There are none. Nor on Facebook, neither on Facebook at the moment either, no.
Okay, that's great. Well, chip in when you can. So I can take questions from the floor. As a totally blind person myself, I'm going to be assisted by Jamal Abdullah from one of the managers of Bradley Field. So Jamal will identify people, because I think you know quite a number of people in here Jamal. So are there any burning questions from the floor, please, for any of the Sightline Council people, or indeed for us, for our speakers? Anyone?
Frank, it's Jules.
So, yes.
It's a question to Michael. Michael, I'm really, really interested in your service provision. It sounds like nothing else I've heard about. Is there any attempt or dialogue to replicate the same service provision in other areas in the region?
It's a really interesting point that you raised, Jules. No, we are the only one in the country, certainly the only NHS one. There are places around doing elements of what we do, but nobody's brought it all together. So yes, there's quite a bit of research at the moment in Cheshire and Merseyside. Professor Sir Michael Marmot, who is at the Centre for Social Inequality at University College London, is leading a whole process in Cheshire and Merseyside, looking at the data around population health and well-being. We're a case study featured within that as being something a little bit different. And we have published, we do research into this. I think it's an interesting one because there was an element of, there was an appetite on the part of our organisation to respond to the lived experience and insights of the people on the receiving end of our services. Not everywhere in the system has a board with that level of moral fibre or even courage, shall we say. I probably shouldn't say that on record, should I? But there is a sense that they were willing to take seriously the views of the people who were on the receiving end, and that's why we did it. Some people thought we were absolutely mad to do it, but it's 5 years in, we're beginning to see some of the research and the evidence paying dividends.
Thank you. Any other questions, please?
There's what?
Yes, please, Rachel, yes.
There's one on Zoom, so it's for Kelly. Is the 6 Dots counselling service a free service?
Yes, it's completely free. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, thanks. I have one, Jamal, if no one...
Yeah, there's some...
Oh, carry on.
Thank you. Margaret.
Am I next?
Yes.
Margaret, yes, please.
Right. Thank you. This is a sort of a question and answer thing. I'm writing a book at the moment. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm writing a book at the moment about the experiences of people with sight loss, so that people, future generations, will understand how we coped or how we didn't. And if anybody here or on Zoom would like to contact me, the number is available at the Bradley Centre. And just with ideas, I'd be very grateful, please. And please, can I just say, I am also deaf, and I have struggled with some of the speakers here this morning. And it is very, very difficult. I don't know if there's a loop system here. If there isn't, there should be. I'm sorry if I've missed a few things. And can I also say, at the end, to cheer everybody up, my guide dog has written here a little piece, and it'll only take me 3 minutes to read. Can I do it at the end? Thank you. I'll do it at the end.
That falls to me to allow, I suppose. And I know what will happen if I don't. Sorry, that falls to me to allow, and if I don't allow that, I know what will happen, Margaret.
Yes, I'll pick you up.
Hopefully there will be time. Thank you, Margaret, indeed. There are some more questions from people.
It was a similar question that was asked before, but not about the region. And I asked the same thing for Kelly. Did you just do the Mersey, the Liverpool area, or did you do the surrounding area?
No, so it's the whole of the Merseyside area. And
the city region?
Yeah, Liverpool city region, yeah.
Thank you.
And someone else? Please, yes. Can you announce who you are and then we'll know? Paul? Yeah.
Michael, you know you said that you have a website to read about your services and that. You know the website that you actually use, does it include like drop-down menus or is it user-friendly and use another application like yours to read it?
Michael, may I just check that, did you catch that on Zoom? Because Paul's fairly quiet speaker, unusually.
No, I didn't get that, Frank.
Paul is asking Michael about his organisation's website. Does it'll have drop down, etc. And Michael, you can deal with that, I'm sure.
So it does have accessibility software that enables it to be used. So the Mersey Care main website is now fully functioning in the way we would want it. The Life Room site is not as good as I would want, but actually we're just in the process. We've just commissioned the full redevelopment with a focus on full accessibility, including listening software and easy read.
Michael, sorry, can you just make, so me and Jay, we've been working on accessibility on HMRC website and what's not accessible. Would you be prepared to listen to people to, you know, consult you on how you can improve it for Life website?
Very much so. There will be a lived experience focus group working as part of the task group for the website. So by all means, get through to me and we will include you in. We're wanting this to be, we trade as an inclusion service, and we need to be a damn sight better at it than we are, but we'll only get there if you were willing to help us. So yes, please.
Thanks, Michael. For our Zoom colleagues, Paul was offering assistance from his angle for comments and observations and help or assistance, advice on websites and what's suitable for VI people and what's not. I think we have another question.
Yeah, question from Brian is, I spent the Sightline house, Matt said me, this is about, if you're obvious, which I think that's what the main thing is, at the Sightline house, could you get the manufacturers of the drugs and the medicines to put braille on the packets? And the chemicals in the kitchen, like that. Now, you might not know this, but drugs, 90% of all the drugs we have are either petroleum or chemical based, where medicines are made from plants, but they're still dangerous, distinct from the ones you've got.
Thank you. Thank you.
But could you, because I'm one of these silly people who struggle behind you train.
Thank you, Brian. Again,
that is important. So if you get a packet of paracetamol, it's not very long. But you get something like that, with only one person who uses it and who touches it.
Brian, I'm just translating. Just to explain to our Zoom colleagues, Brian is asking about the labeling, braille labeling on drugs, various drugs and medicines, etc. And it's particularly addressed to the Sight Loss Council. So I'm passing that over to Matt, who I think is going to deal with it.
Absolutely, yes. So Brian, you're completely right. The Sight Loss Council is about campaigning and advocacy, lobbying. It's exactly what we want to do. And also what we want to do is listen to that voice and do what Brian and Boss said people tell us they want us to do. So you're absolutely right in terms of labelling, and not just braille. Actually, it's because not everyone chooses to use braille. I, for one, can't read or won't use braille, but I might use technologies. And I think it's important that, yes, you're right, to look at labelling, and I don't actually see something that would stop the Sight Loss Council from trying to advocate for that and look at that. There's definitely something we could explore and have a little conversation with you offline as well, Brian. That's okay.
Yeah, very quickly if you can.
No, CAI.
The CAI, yeah.
You go in and you go to Sainsbury's, Morrison's, Tesco's, and that, and it's a really it doesn't do functionality in that, because the barcode is trying to do. So probably that Aldi and Butter. I don't go that very often.
That is something we will take up.
We've got a couple more questions.
Yeah, please, very quickly if you can, please. Yeah.
Basically, it's just a throw out there. I'm partially sighted, so I can see what's in front of me. I can't see on my left hand side now. So I've got a physical disability as well. So I will try and become an inspirational speaker. But the problem we're having at the moment
is trying to ring schools, trying to get information whether what I want to bring to the table is what the schools need. And I was just wondering whether people would know where to go from there, because I'm really struggling to get the information I need.
Thank you. Can you give us your name, please?
Brendan.
Sorry.
Brendan.
Brendan, thank you. Brendan was talking about wanting to be an inspirational speaker and knowing where to go and what to do exactly. I'm not sure if there's anyone in the room to deal with this. We would certainly take the question away and look at it and try and help. Nikki Barnett is the Deputy Chief Executive of Bradbury Fields here in Liverpool.
Bradbury Fields does work with somebody, Brendan, who helps with coaching and mentoring. It might be that she can make some inquiries for you to how you go about achieving what you want to achieve. There are some other services available as well, such as employment and stuff like that, which might be able to actually lead you in the right direction.
Perhaps
take the details and have a further chat.
Perhaps Nikki at lunchtime you can take Brendan's details. Yes, please. Thank you. Nikki was offering assistance there, possibly from one or two people we know at Bradbury Fields who deal and work in this field. I think we have one more, Jamal, have we?
Yes,
please.
Sorry, it's me again.
Right, it's Nikki. Speak up, please.
Really,
Speak up.
Michael, a follow on from what Paul was saying about the accessibility website. I think one of the big issues for visually impaired people is actually getting from A to B. And whilst I accept you saying that you're already having conversations with Bradbury Fields, maybe from here, I'm wondering whether incorporated on your website the directions how to get to various venues where you do the live rooms, and in terms of people actually being able to negotiate the outdoor environment to get there, because that is the biggest stumbling block. And you might well have somebody that lives literally around the corner who doesn't have to get there, because doesn't quite know where it is. So I think part of the help that you're getting to make it more accessible would be actually to make the venues accessible online so people can actually get there.
Can I just summarise before Michael answers? Thank you. Nikki is talking about information on Michael's organisation's website to make sure that there are directions for visually impaired people to get to the various centres where their organisation works. Michael.
Just to say, I think that is really helpful. It could be a million miles away, couldn't it, if actually that descriptive direction isn't there. So I absolutely will take that away.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Grant, we've got a question from Rachel on Zoom, please.
Rachel, please. Sorry, yes.
So Eamon on Facebook asks, what would you ask sighted people to do to become more aware of the challenges for blind and partially sighted people?
Who's that to? Anybody want to take that up?
Anyone? Yeah.
Communication is always crucial in every walk of life, isn't it?
Can I just say something?
Nikki, please speak up. Yeah.
I don't want to hog all the answers to questions. I think that it's a two-way situation with visually impaired people, because not everybody looks blind or visually impaired. And I think depending on where you're talking about that, you want people to be able to assist. They actually need to know you've got a sight box as well. Certainly during the pandemic, one of the things that we thought of at Bradbury Fields was that people coming into our centre ought to carry a cane. Now, a cane, there are a lot of people, they don't want to carry it, but other people won't necessarily know you're visually impaired. So I actually think there needs to be more encouragement for people to actually carry canes so that the wider public know that you've got sight box. But I know that's not for everybody.
Thank you. I know certainly when I was a teacher at St Vincent School for the Blind in Liverpool for many years, a lot of our partially sighted people, and partially sighted is a bit of an awkward term really, because their sight can be pretty reasonable in ordinary light and not very good in bright sunlight. They just sometimes did not want people to know that they had a sight problem, and it's very difficult. I don't know, Kelly, if you've got a view on this as someone with sight loss.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think carrying a cane is really important. Yeah, and I do think it's a two-way street. So sometimes I think we expect sighted people to know, but they don't know. They might never have met someone who's blind or visually impaired before. So it's really important to politely educate people, not with a a chip on your shoulder kind of way, but you know, in a polite manner to kind of say, oh, would you mind doing it like this, or would you help me with that? I think we need to communicate as much as we expect.
Absolutely.
I've got 3 more questions from the floor.
We're struggling, folks, very quickly.
Just one quick question from me.
I've got to allow him.
I may well be the last one. Just about the social prescribing. One of my real passions is actually sport and physical activity, and I wondered whether that was routinely part of social prescribing to include that, and if so, how might something like the walking groups and that be accessible to visually impaired people?
That's possibly to me as well. I think that's it's another absolutely great point. We have a lot of sporting activity, and we have personal trainers on our Lightroom staff as well for our own learning experiences. We haven't done it yet. We will now.
Thank you.
Mike?
It was just a point about the caves, Mike Bailey. Some years ago, I wrote an article to the it was called How the Symbol Cave, and we actually published it, and the RNIB got hold of it, and that's made it used as a blog. It's still on there. RNIB, Mike's blog, How the Symbol Cave.
Mike Bailey here is talking about an article he wrote some time ago concerning canes. Last very quick question.
Yeah, just question from the table.
Yes.
Norma.
It was just to answer the question the person asked online. I think it was Rachel, wasn't it?
Yes, it's Rachel.
Just talk, come over and talk. I think sometimes when you've got a guide dog, it gives an opportunity that people do come over to you. But if you haven't got a guide dog sticking his tail in your face, I think just be, I agree with Kelly. We've got to take some responsibility and be a bit more relaxed about our situ. And I think we want people to talk to us. So if anyone ever sees us, just come over and talk. And that starts the conversation. You don't have to do anything special. Just communicate with us.
Thank you, Norma. At that, I'm going to draw the question to a close now, because we're moving into our breakout session, and you have 10 minutes to deal with these 3 questions. You've got scribes on each table here, and I know it's sorted out on Zoom. Your 3 questions, folks, are: what have you found, just to run through, what have you found most difficult during COVID? What services do you want to access now, and what can be done to help? Help. So if you move to your breakout work, I'll call you back 12:10. I'm sorry to be so bossy, but we do have to keep the time. The sandwiches will go cold. Right, I'm going to take a smattering of answers from each of the tables, but I'm not going to take every answer from every table. That will take us too long. But we will be taking note of what people have written on each table, and we'll be collating stuff and giving you information and feedback later on. Perhaps, Matt, I can ask your table to give us how you dealt with question 1.
Question 1, yes.
No, you're not Matt.
Oh,
Mr. Cliff, the boss.
Well done,
I'm sorry. Sorry,
They don't get the car. We said about the difficulties coming out of COVID. Actually, people spend so much time in the surroundings of their own homes, different environments that they know like the back of their hand. What's been most difficult is actually going back out into that outside world, using senses that perhaps you don't easily switch off when you're back at home. So one of the biggest issues was actually that transition to real life mobility. And obviously one of the things we said we needed as a result of was to look at rehab provision and mobility provision, walking, all that sort of thing.
I think many of us will know of examples, real life examples of that sort of situation, I'm sure. Can I ask Norma, your table? I'm not sure who your spokesman is. It might be you. Question two, question two, if we may, please.
The question we asked, I mean, it fell into all of the questions, really, the answers that we got. It was about isolation, loneliness, not getting appointments at hospital, not getting clear information for anyone, and finding, you know, things that they've coped with before COVID. It's very hard to cope with. Not having a family around them, being on their own, going to the shops, getting shopping. So there's generalised isolation, isn't it? You know, where people can't get anyone else to do things.
But what services do you have you people said you want to access now?
Well, good hospital appointments and clear information from the hospitals, especially the eye hospitals. I'm not knocking the eye hospitals, but that's the things that we were talking about. Also, what was that? Was that it? About the hospital, the eye hospitals?
Okay, that's
yeah. I think it because we let one person who's not affected or not involved with Sight Loss Council talk on our group, you know, for our group.
Yes.
So there was a lot of stuff that you were talking about, wasn't there, Margaret? But mainly appointments to hospital, clear information, because apparently in the hospitals they've been using elective services where you have to go to a system and then you wait 3 months to get a reply from your consultant.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is that okay?
No, thank you very much. That's very helpful. Again, communication is so often the big issue, isn't it? In work, in playing, whatever. I'm told we can't go to Zoom because it hasn't worked as far as their breakout session went. So, Jules, you're not the spokesman now, are you? Or the spokeswoman, sorry. It's John, is it? What of your question 3, please?
Question 3.
Yeah, how did you deal with that? You might not have had a chance to get to
well,
it.
as people tell, the Handy Mike, he's interested in the life group. Maybe one could open more open to because he said it's a bit far from the get to. But also, if Robbie Fields could organise a minibus once we can take a few people to people, you know, people who might be interested in doing it.
Okay.
He's also talking about, you know, keep fit in the gym, and he says like at the minute, the gyms are getting them slowly getting off the ground, and he's finding it increasingly difficult to get appointments at the moment. And we'd like that to sort of improve so he'd get out.
Thank you.
He's been feeling very isolated lately, and you know.
That's fine. Thank you very much on that. Thank you very much.
Jules, can I just add really quickly?
Please, yes, do.
We also were talking about picking up on what Norma was saying about hospitals, and more generally there being a need for training. So in terms of services going forward, we think as visually impaired people, it's not unreasonable to expect staff in areas that we come into contact with to have much better awareness of visual impairment.
Indeed, and in fact, some of us on Sight Loss Council, on Merseyside Sight Loss Council, are working on quite a big project to do with training, and certainly hospitals are in our line of sight. We're trying to help in that situation. Jamal, can you tell us what your table dealt with question 1?
Question 1, well, our responses from our table was the biggest responses in terms of people being on their own, being left at home with the kids, having no support, especially as support was from older people in the families. So there was a big void there in terms of the family support. Still anxious even after lockdown, because the question focused on coming out of lockdown as well. And after COVID, especially getting the bus or going to the school playgrounds. And again, that was really important to see the dynamics of people wearing masks and social isolating. Loneliness, isolation, again, that featured heavily. Also, being stuck in the house was a big factor. And if it wasn't for the children and the dogs, i.e. guide dogs, again, focusing on that element as well. you know, for companionship. Remember being loneliness and isolation being up there. Big one was depression as well. And we also noticed, I think there was an overspill on this one. No, that's it, Frank.
No, thank you, but thank you. That's very helpful. That's great. I'm not sure which tables I've now left out. Naomi, sorry.
We've got 4 tables.
Forgive me. Yes, there are 4 to go. Naomi, your bunch.
So Frank is here, and I'm scribing for Naomi.
Great.
I'll answer question 2 for you if you like.
Please, thank you.
So services now. Accessibility to COVID information is poor for BI people in terms of braille, large print audio, so I'd like to see some of that addressed. Face-to-face services reopening at Bradbury Fields will be a big thing, and a real return to the pre-pandemic position, and access to GP surgeries on a face-to-face basis rather than the crazy situation that we have where it's all over the phone.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you. Question 2 is what can be done to help? Michael, you had a table.
I know I'm with Norman, so he's already fed that.
Fine.
Tables.
Kelly, please.
Yeah, so what can we do to help? We talked about some services how to get open the doors, so everyone can open that a little bit. And we also said about people working together more, so organisations working together to help the same, to help people rather than everyone working on their own. It's kind of good when people collaborate. You can achieve a lot more.
Thank you. Great. Question 2 is what services do you want to access now? Paul, what about your bunch?
So our main services we wanted to access is general accessibility, not the roads and the crossings and not enough tactile pavements, as Joe said. He's got a big problem in this area because there's no crossings. With regards to services, it's getting back into things like dealing with mental health services, and then there's the loneliness services, and the elderly find who is being paid, but they find themselves isolated. And then there's that part where some people are actually suffering more now because they have the routine with sleep patterns and hydrophobia. So if there's some sort of counselling, we could access that.
Please, yeah, speak up though, please.
So I live in West London, of 5 roads. Not one of junction boxes with the traffic lights with the same problems. So when we cross the road in both sides of the car, that's the reality of my life day to day. When I'm accessing the supermarkets, the groceries, the parks.
So many will say that.
Community, people being independent without roads in place at every road, not couple. We're left independent on taxis and other people.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's just one table to go. Can I confess that I had a list of who was the head of each table, as it were, and coffee was spilt on it, and I can't read it. So I'm doing it from memory. Isn't such a wonderful thing? Right, is it Naomi? Sorry, I left out.
No, Naomi's table.
Who have I left out?
You're up to date. You're all on the brand.
Thank God for that. Great. Folks, thank you very much for that. As I say, all feedback from you will be taken, and notes will be, we won't be correcting spelling, don't worry, but we'll take note of what you're saying, and there will be a document, Matt, am I right? Produced eventually.
Yeah, we'll collate all the information, and also if anyone's got any more questions for our guest speakers, not at least one of them has to shoot on fairly soon. Any questions, you just have to scribe at your table, take a note of it, and we'll record it and put them down for answers.
Thank you. Can I just say one personal message? Mike, before Crilly, before you go, can you have a quick word with me, please? There's something I need you to introduce to. That's my part, ladies and gentlemen. People on Zoom, I'm sorry the breakout didn't quite work out for you, but again, we will be receiving any questions or comments from our Zoom colleagues, and they will be taken into account as well and collated. It's my pleasant duty now to pass over to Norma Williams, who is also a member of our Sightline Council, and Norma is going to issue the official goodbye. Norma.
Oh, thanks so much,
you.
Frank. And give a round of applause for Frank. Firstly, may I thank all of our speakers who've been absolutely fabulous. I thought it was intriguing, wonderful to listen to you. Kelly, you're an inspiration. Right. And to you folks, the very special people of all, the VIP community, who need all of this. You need to get some normality back and everything else. Jamal, thank you for bringing everyone in for us. It was wonderful in your team. I don't know all your team. And of course, our Steve from Christopher Grange, who helped us yesterday with the setting up of the tables. Thank you so much, folks. And it was lovely to be in your company.